Oh, so now that we've opened, we're already at 531. I must tell you, we've crossed 6,200 bookings, registrations, which is a record because there are hardly any webinars which have gone over 2,000, right? So this is thanks to you all. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Vir. Thank you, Mr. Anand, Mr. Kacharu, Patu, you, my brother, Neeraj, Sunjae, Mrs. Paul, Dr. Suri, and I'm happy for your time. Thank you for being here and making it. We owe this to the industry. The industry is in dire need. Unfortunately or fortunately, while you're going to speak over it, the government needs to do a lot more. This is the biggest employment generator. There are entire countries, while I was speaking to Vir, who are run by travel, tourism, and hospitality. And here we have an opportunity staring at our face, but the government is looking away. So we need to do something about this. I won't take much more time. I'll just say we are going to simultaneously, Dr. Suri and Mrs. Paul, we are going to launch a women's special issue today, which we put together. It's an effort of love by women, all women hoteliers in this. So somewhere during this session, I would request you to open up the issue for the people. It's a digital issue for all hoteliers by women hoteliers, right? So over to you, Vir. Thank you.
Thanks, Bhuvanesh. You know, Bhuvanesh and I have known each other a long time. We were colleagues at the Hindustan Times in that prehistoric era when he was looking after distribution, circulation, and I was editor. It was a long time ago, so it's good to do something again. I'll just tell you the broad rules for this webinar. It's difficult enough to do it with so many eminent people in the same room. It's even more difficult to do it when people are disconnected and are looking at little screens and trying to find each other. So I will get, first of all, Nakul Anand to give us a brief overview. And then I will ask each person about different areas in the industry. I've had chats with them, so I know roughly what everyone is interested in. It's a bit difficult on Zoom, I've discovered, for many reasons. One is if two people talk at the same time, you often can't hear anyone. The second is the technology often lets you down. Sometimes Wi-Fi is not good, sometimes Zoom fails. And Bhuvanesh informed me excitedly that last Sunday there were porno hacks on Zoom that while people were talking, hackers got to work and pornography was shown. If that happens, well, what can I say? Enjoy yourselves. But until then, we'll do our best to try and make this work. Let me introduce the panelists. I think most people have already seen our ads, know who they are, and Bhuvanesh has mentioned them. But let me introduce them in no particular. You missed who?
Vikram.
You missed Vikram. Okay, so let me introduce them in no particular order. Most of you will know Dr. Jyotsna Suri, who's not just the owner of Lalit Hotels, but is also a respected voice in the industry. She's represented industry on many, many industry bodies, has interacted closely with government over the decades. And if anybody understands Delhi and how the government works, and also understands the hotel industry, it's Dr. Suri. Priya Paul, also many of you will know. I think the official designation is something to do with APG Surendra Hotels, but most of you will know her as the person who runs Park Hotels, and more significantly, as a person who's been truly ahead of her times, who's introduced the idea of a hip hotel to India, who's learned how to appeal to a younger demographic, and has been one of the pioneers of F&B. Vikram Oberoi also needs no introduction. In this kind of gathering, his surname alone would be an introduction, but Vikram's much more than just his father's son. Since he's taken over as CEO of the Oberoi Group, the product has improved by leaps and bounds, and it's really a pleasure for me that he's here. Patu Keswani, I have known for years and years, since his days, I think he was resident manager at Taj Mansingh. He was always one of the smartest people the Tatas had. He was the task officer, easily the smartest guy in Taj Group, left, became an entrepreneur, and is I think the most successful hotel entrepreneur of his generation. He runs Lemon Tree Hotels, which all of you have heard of. Who does that leave? Sunjae Sharma, again a Taj connection. I knew Sunjae when he was a catering assistant at the Taj Bengal. He was even then a star. He's gone on to bigger and bigger things. He's now head of Hyatt Hotels in India. Neeraj, Govil, and Nakul, Anand, who I will introduce later, run between them the two largest hotel chains in India. That's if you don't count 2-star hotels and 1-star hotels to increase your numbers. So these are the guys who are really in many ways going to determine the future of the industry. Neeraj, who's usually low profile, and I'm very glad has agreed to come today, has worked all over the world. He understands hoteliering from a global perspective, and his strength, I think, is not just that he have that global perspective, he's also very good on details locally. Who have I left out? I'm trying to think. Well, obviously I've left out Nakul, who I will introduce last, but I think Mr. Kachru. Mr. KV Kachru is one of those people you can't leave out when you think of the Indian hotel industry. He's one of the stalwarts of the industry. He's seen it grow over decades. He understands it inside out. He's been associated with Radisson Hotels for many, many years, and he has an emeritus position. But he's here not just to represent Radisson, but because of his own stature, his own identity. Bhuvanesh, have I left out anyone except for Nakul? Don't think so. Okay, so I'll introduce Nakul Anand. Nakul Anand is the doyen of the Indian hotel industry. He's an ITC lifer. He started as a lobby manager. His first job was with ITC Hotels. He's seen the chain grow. The way in which ITC pushed into luxury over the last 10, 15 years is entirely Nakul's doing. He's created the modern ITC chain as we know it. He's, of course, now in a much more elevated position. He's a director on the board of ITC, the parent company. He looks after many things, retail, health, one of which is hotels. But he has a unique perspective on the hotel industry. So Nakul, I'm going to start with you. If you could give us, in say a few minutes, because we don't have a lot of time.
Don't forget faith.
Okay, I always have faith in Nakul, but Nakul is also head of faith, which is a federation of hotels and associated industries. But Nakul, if you could start by giving us your perspective. I've always noticed it because you're so deeply well-read and such a details guy. You have an overall perspective that I always learn from. So tell us in about 7 or 8 minutes, what you think the scene is currently for the hotel industry, what you think will happen, and what the future will be.
Thanks, Ved. Am I audible?
Yep, I can hear you certainly.
Okay. There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. And this is what Lennon said. This is one such situation. With 5 million affected, 329,000 dead. On the world tourism scene yesterday, the UNWTO said that international travel would be down anything between 60 and 80%. Cost the global economy $2.1 trillion, 75 people rendered jobless. Closer home in India, I've always been quoting this figure that it's a very simple calculation. We are 10% of India's GDP, which is 200 lakh crore. That puts us as 20 lakh crore. 50% will be washed off. And so the loss to the Indian travel and tourism industry will somewhere be close to 5 lakh crore, 10 lakh crores. Those of you who read Economic Times headlines today, it said that 55 million people are employed in the tourism industry in India, and job losses to the extent of 38 million. The restaurant industry will lose a couple of million also, and 4 out of 10 restaurants, sadly, will never see the light of day again. Truly, this is what I call a black swan event. There are opinions which are ripples on the surface, shallow and easily changed. There are attitudes which are currents below the surface, deeper and stronger. There are values which are the deep tides, slow to change, yet very powerful. When values change, it causes a seismic shift. Rules are rewritten, mindsets change, and society resets its priorities. When the Black Death ended, federalism and with the Black Death ended federalism and serfdom. World War II saw the rise of the participation rate of women in the workforce. 9/11 reshaped transportation and security policies worldwide. TSA was born. 26/11 reshaped hotel security. 2003 SARS, the attitudes toward shopping in China, and there was a surge in online shopping. What are these new priorities? There are really 3 major priorities. The first is health and hygiene. Health is the new wealth, and it moves from being reactive to proactive. Safety assumes even greater importance arising from the fear of infection. Emphasis on distancing and disinfecting. sustainability will get amplified. Only yesterday, Booking.com published that 87% of people said they would travel sustainably because it is restorative and regenerative versus take, make, and dispose. The difference also is that people would look for validation with visible certification. Moments of truth will have to be converted to moments of trust. Trust is truly the crux. The road to the new normal is also paved with digital. Exploration of the digital, finding new ways to disconnect, to connect through meaningful, what I call phygital experiences, the new communication tool. In sum, we must keep one eye on the microscope. As Toffler said, it's all about capability versus capability. We have our limitations. We can trim the fat, but we can't cut the muscle. The second eye must go on the telescope. A storm draws something out of us that calm seas don't. Every disaster brings with it seeds of opportunity. But we must remember that these seeds of opportunity are perishable. Closer home, in the Indian industry, the federations, various associations, put together a three-pronged strategy of what they call survival, revival, and thrival. Survival, with the hotel industry being in the ICU, on every conceivable life support system. Cash is the bloodline. The industry has put forward a whole lot of demands, and I think Mr. Suri is going to cover this later on. Revival, we are looking forward to the 25 million people who go outbound. How can we create demand out of them? We are optimistic in believing that revenge holidays will take place, and how can the industry capitalize it? As far as thrival is concerned, it's transforming impossible India to an even more incredible India in the new world order. What are the changes that are going to take place as a result of these seismic shifts in the hotel industry? The world at one time came to conquer COVID. Then they wanted to contain it. Now they believe we have to coexist with it. This is going to lead to what we call the rise of sanitized travel. People will travel more intelligently, more impulsively. Again, hygiene is the new 800 thread count. Cleanliness is the new amenity as disinfectant protocol. Replace location with cleanliness. Sanitization is the new security. Thermal scanners are the new metal detectors. It is not enough to be aesthetically clean. We all as hotels would have to turn to what is called clinically clean. I just reiterate that both perception and reality matters. And therefore, our hotels would have to become what I call cleanliness theaters with visible demonstration of cleanliness taking place. You spray, so shall you reap. Last but not the least, housekeeping moves to the epicenter of hotel operation. The result, we would see thermal scanners, electrostatic sprayers, innovation, disinfection technology, UV technology, hospital-grade disinfectant, pure rooms with air purification and sanitization. Over 100 touch points in the hotel, some high, some low, and how we are going to work on them. The next point is the rise of distance. As an outcome of the 6-foot rule, people have termed a word that is coined as social distancing. As an industry, I will urge you, we can never get socially distant. We should all as an industry collectively call it safe distancing. An outcome of this is high-tech service is heading towards touchless service. In an ideal situation, the only hand that touches are yours. Low-touch service protocols will come into place. Again, I would prefer to call this contact light service and not touchless service. You would see digital keys. You would see check-in and check-out without any contact. You would see plexiglass partitions. You would see texting concierge, voice-enabled controls, digital menus, contactless payments, and so on. And I believe some of the other speakers are going to talk about this. This seismic shift also has ripples on some of the other aspects of the industry. The first one is food and beverage, where takeaway has become the new eating out, as home becomes the new epicenter of our lives. Home's ground has become the new ground. QSR is the quality, and will now stand for quality, safety, and reliability. The big fat Indian wedding has gone on a diet. Mice has gone on a coma, and there's accentuation of the ghost kitchen. We are no longer scared of ghosts. What are the actions that the industry needs to take? Redesign service, buffet etiquette, if at all buffets do exist. Platter to plate will cease to exist. Yet, we must maintain the integrity of our brands while planning these. Takeaways would require tamper-proof seals. There'll be new menus embedded with health, wellness, sustainability, rise in plant-based organic, and of course, social distancing from junk food. Redefine space ratios. We'll have to reconfigure restaurants. The earlier National Building Code had said 5 feet for vertical drinking and 17 feet for sit down. The new WHO guidelines says 27 feet, irrespective of what purpose it is there. Room service will find new ways to deliver, knock and drop, grab and go, and contactless ordering through QR codes, etc., will become a way of life. Last but not the least, I must emphasize that in the long term, what this is going to have a tremendous impact is on our buildings and how we redesign hotels. It was Churchill who said, "We shape buildings, thereafter buildings shape us." It is believed that in the Spanish flu, before the Spanish flu, buildings were all ornamental. It is post the Spanish flu that straight lines begin to appear. We need to create an environment that appeals to all 5 senses, not just visionary. Design that can affect transmission-reducing pathogen transmissions through antimicrobial materials that can weaken or kill disease-causing organisms. Less porous clean surfaces, less carpets, as these tend to be dust traps, bacteria-resistant materials, safe distancing, hygiene checks into the design have to be integrated, increase fresh air, antibacterial switches, paints, laminates, even fabric. Designs that render itself to cleanability. There's also a great talk of biophilic designs. I also just learned about this term recently. It's connecting guests with nature in a variety of ways to reduce stress, enhance creativity, improve well-being, and expedite health. My favorite subject has always been that of sleep. And I've said that the hotel industry sells sleep. We've done a lot of work on sleep, and sleep being very closely connected with health is going to gain a lot of grounds. I urge you all to not only, man does not sleep by bed alone. In addition to the 5 physical senses of sleep, I quote as an example, we looked at the biological factors, fatigue, food, etc. We looked at the positive neurotransmitters, be it melatonin, be it magnesium, B6. We put this into the food menu in our sleep laboratory, and we measured this against parameters of heart rate, breathing, rhythm, movement, snoring, and all of these. And some of these were absolutely great results, etc. With this, I believe, and I come to my conclusion, that what is the new service mantra? All about redefining our spaces and experience. Many years ago, you gave me a book called Setting the Table by Danny Meyer. I quote from him, "When we are born, we get 4 gifts: eye contact, smile, a hug, and some food. This is also the foundation of the hospitality industry. And 3 out of the 4 are still, my friends, very possible. We therefore need to create experiences that reduce anxiety and well-being to guests who want a sense of freedom with personal controls, will fear situations they can't control. My new definition of service would be seldom heard, seldom seen, never touched, always felt. You can't smile, but let your service bring a smile in the guest. I get confidence that touchless service can be as successful as high-touch service if you go back into our history and look at the Namaste. The Namaste had no physical contact, and yet the emotions that it evoked was second to none." That's all I had to say, Vir, and I hope I haven't overcrossed my time.
Actually, no, Nakul, that was not only comprehensive, it was frankly quite brilliant. But I'm going to keep you for a longer time because I need to ask you a question. One of the many hats you wear on the ITC board is health. So tell us, I mean, realistically, how long do you think this pandemic is going to last? How long before a vaccine is discovered? How long before life returns to some semblance of normality?
So I think that there are a couple of negative signs. One is that the migration of people from the metro cities to the rural areas is going to make sure that there is a spread of corona also in the villages, which is going to be difficult to control, and the testing kits, etc., are not going to be available. If you look at the doubling rate in India, it's not it doesn't look very, very good. And we must remember that it's all dependent on the denominator. So most people believe, and from many of the reports that I have read, India is going to peak in July and August, right? I also believe, although people claim that a vaccine would be found in 6, 12, 14 months, many people believe, and my doctors sort of tell me that it's not before 18 months that a vaccine can be found. Even after the vaccine is found, before we can sort of say that we are a COVID-free, to some extent, it would take another 6 months. So we are talking of 24 months. What then is our future? We have only one future. We can't wait for lockdowns to open and close and say that we're going to react after the lockdown opens, because that's purely political. We have to find ways that the situation, we live to coexist with this situation. And all our service designs and many of the things that I mentioned, and there's some brilliant job, and a lot of the readings that I'm doing are from chains, the Hyatt, the Marriott, the Oberoi, the Taj. Each one has done some brilliant job. The Accor, I've seen some readings of the Lemon Tree, etc. Each one has done a brilliant job. We've collectively pulled this together. We've got to learn to coexist for the next 24 months.
So that's not really great news, no? All those people saying that there will be a vaccine perfected by September and then we'll all be okay.
I just need to step in for just a few seconds.
Yeah.
We have a situation, the numbers are jumped so much, people are not able to log in. So I just want to pass a message to everybody who's watching. Look, the numbers are unprecedented. I'm getting calls after calls, messages after messages. Anybody who's unable to log into Zoom because of the large numbers, please move into the bwhotelier.com online and BW Hotelier Facebook page. The feed is live over there. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry for this.
Thanks.
My apologies.
Thanks, Bhuvanesh. Not to worry. The more people who watch, the better it is. I wanted to go to Dr. Jyotsna Suri. The question every hotelier is asking, and pretty much anybody who's involved in the hotel business is asking, if you look at what Trump is doing for hotels in America, if you look at what the British government is doing, if you look at what the Italians did in terms of salaries, nearly every government has recognized the importance of tourism as a cash earner, as a means of employment. Why is it, though initially we were all optimistic, the Indian government has decided not to take much interest in tourism? Dr. Suri?
Thank you, Vir. Really, I have no answer for that, Vir, because I cannot understand why this industry is being overlooked. It is going to be definitely the front runner for kickstarting the economy, because of the wide range that we cover, the whole spectrum that we cover, the ripple effect that goes down so deep, and more than that is the feel-good factor that travel and tourism brings. And we're all very dejected right now, very down in the dumps, and the feel-good factor that will come up with this is something that it's for all to see. And I really don't understand why the government has not been able to recognize it. We had some very simple requests. I won't even say that they were demands. We were looking at a moratorium, but this morning, Shaktikant Das, the RBI governor, has extended the moratorium by another 3 months, which again I think is a bit of a joke, because the first 3 months are over and the lockdown is still there, and our industry is not going to get back anywhere close to normal for another year. So, but having said that, it's a bit of a respite. We did need some support, like the support all governments. For example, the UK is giving 80% of the salary, so there's been no job losses. People are on board. The hotels may be closed, but at least their jobs are intact. Here, the problem that is going to be faced by us, it is already being faced by us, and it's a very typical scenario in all hotels. Your biggest payout is your payroll, and post that is your bank, and then you get on to your operational and utilities. The payroll is becoming a huge issue for us, because there has been absolutely no generation of income whatsoever. We've got a few doctors here and there, but there's nothing really coming out of it. Now, how long can we sustain that payroll is a big question. We were looking for some support from the government, at least to give us some element, maybe not all, maybe 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever they could. It hasn't happened. Why has it not happened is really a very difficult question to answer. But perhaps there is a feeling that exists in policymakers that we are an elitist industry. I mean, the hotels are all luxury and they're 5-star and they have a lot of money, so they can get, they can cope up with this, which is not correct, because the luxury element of our hotels is very small. We go down to 3-star, 2-star, we go down to the roadside amenities, we go down to, bed and breakfast rooms. There's a whole range that exists. So it's not just the luxury segment. So clearly, Vir, I think they do need to realize it, and we are going to continue We also need some support from the states, because there is, we have these payouts of mandatory payouts, statutory payments that we make, whether it's property tax, whether it's lease rentals, whether it's license payments. Now, when there is no business and we still have to continue paying those, it's irrational. So the states need to come up and support us as well. And so does the center. When is it going to happen is a big question mark, but we're not stopping. I think every single association has reached and knocked at every single door, and we will continue to do so, because this industry needs to survive. Because if it does not survive, it is really going to be a very, very negative effect on the economy of India. And on the other hand, if we do survive, we can definitely be the torch bearers of the revival of the Indian economy. Thank you, Vir.
Jyoti, one more question. Many people seem to confuse what you're asking for with what airlines are asking for. Airlines are asking for large cash bailouts. You are not asking for large cash bailouts. You're asking for specific things like waivers of taxes, certain charges at a particular time when you're empty. So that's an important distinction, that your demands are not massive, and that even if you are a luxury industry, the luxury goes to your guests, not to your room service boys, not to your housekeeping boys, and they are the ones who suffer in all this.
Well, I mean, I don't see why they should connect us. So, well, aviation is part of travel and tourism. There is no doubt about that. But I think what we were asking for was not a cash bailout.
Right.
We never did. That's why it becomes even more difficult for us to comprehend that what we are asking for is not in any way denting the exchequer in any which way. It's only a support. So what is holding them back is a very, I can't comprehend it, but I feel that we continue to push and we will get it. Airlines are opening up on Monday. And by the way, what Nakul said, that it's not social distancing, and we should never use that word, because man is not antisocial. What we are talking about is physical distance, or safe distance as he called it. Now in the airline, there are going to be 3 seats and it's going to be a full load.
Yeah.
So there's going to be, if it's a 200-seater, there are going to be 200 people. Why is it that the restaurants have to follow any such rules and regulations? Why do we have to have that distance, where if you can be sitting in an aircraft for 4 hours with a full load of 200 people, how does that make it any safer than you coming into a restaurant and being able to get service from a boy who's perhaps wearing a mask? And then the other thing comes up, that if there's a restaurant of 100-seater and we only got 50 people sitting there and all of them are wearing masks, how are we going to do the service with them? Yeah. You know, and it's all about, it's an industry where people serve people. We are people-centric. Yeah. We cannot be robotic. So while I understand what Nakul is saying, that there is going to be a lot of that touchless element that is going to come in, but it's going to take away the very ethos of hospitality. We are people-centric. We have to have that smile on our face. We have to be able to give a comfort to the customer who comes in. So it's a very tight walk that we have to do. Yeah. Having said that, we do have to abide to all hygiene standards. All of us are doing it already. So we do need to keep that in mind. However, I think the government has to sort of loosen up all the do's and don'ts that they are talking about, so that we can actually begin to get a little bit close to normal.
Okay, let me take that to Mr. Kachru, who's been, as I said at the beginning, somebody who's seen the hotel industry pretty much from its infancy, has seen tourism ministers come and go. So why do you think you have received no help from the government at all?
I'm trying to put a smile despite our industry losing almost 10 lakh crore rupees. You know, first of all, I want to thank you all, especially Bhuvanesh, for gathering us here together, because I think it's very important that we talk about it and more talk about it. We're all playing with statistics, but the fact is, do we really want to know whether government cares? I don't know if I'm politically correct in making a statement like this. We all would remember our Prime Minister, in his Independence Day speech, said tourism is one of the 5 pillars of our growth. That pillar is shaking today. And I think if something is not done, we are not only at ground zero, we'll go absolutely down. And let me tell you, if our industry, hospitality industry goes down, so many other industries would also go down, whether it's real estate, it's retail, all would be impacted. We want them to really bring some relief. Now, what is that relief? A colleague of mine the other day wrote an article, and he said, you know, probably people feel in the powers that be that we are begging. We are really not begging. We want to grow the economy. And before we really grow the economy, we need some help. We need to survive. If we don't survive, how will we revive ourselves? We are struggling. And as Jyotsna ji just now said, you know, many of our owners don't really have money to pay bills. We are primarily a management and franchising company. I have, just in our group, Radisson Hotel Group, over 300 owners to deal with. And believe me, we have a lot of problems. The only thing which we have got is, yes, lots of moral support. Everybody we talk to says, yes, your requests are genuine. And I must say, for our industry, all our associations have done a tremendous job. And I've never seen, I've been hanging around here for a very long time, I've never seen all the trade associations coming together in such a manner and with one objective, and that's please help us survive. Jyotsna ji again made a point that there's a myth that we are elite. 80%, over 80% are mid-market hotels and below. And look at the people who will lose their jobs. 42 million jobs are at stake. So government has to do something. And I think we are left with really no choice, but we need to cut costs and job losses would increase. And I think while that's the survival package, we also at the same time need to be, as Prime Minister has said, we need to be Atmanirbhar. And we have to learn to actually be Atmanirbhar and ensure that we keep our costs under control and move ahead and create different revenue streams to just survive. Thanks to you.
Okay. Thank you. Let me take this to Vikram Oberoi, who's been listening very patiently. Vikram, we've talked about Nakul's vision of what the future will be like. We've talked about the government. We haven't talked enough about the human factor. Can we talk a bit about that?
Sorry, I'm just going to unmute it. First of all, to Bhuvanesh and to you, thank you for this opportunity. It's a really difficult time for the industry, for our country, and for the whole economy. But most of all, I think what really pains me, and I'm sure pains all of us, is the tragedy we see happening in India. There's so many of us in India who work on daily wages, who need to earn an income to bring food on their table. And I've often asked myself the question, I said, you know, if I was earned a daily income and I have children, I have twins who are 13, and I couldn't put food on the table for them, and they were hungry, they were unwell, many people will unfortunately die, and Nakul gave some figures on that as well. So the whole tragedy that is happening in our country on the impact on human life, and I'm not even talking about economics now or business, on human life is catastrophic. It's Certainly, I think probably something like this happened during the Depression, but certainly not after that. And, you know, the people have already, Jyotsna and has already covered the point on government support. We're all disappointed that government has done nothing for tourism and hospitality, even though we employ so many people. But I think the most important thing in my mind when we look forward actually is really how do we generate demand? Because we can't live on government support. That's an intermediary support measure. Ultimately, what needs to happen is people need to be able to visit hotels, go to restaurants and dine. And I think, so I have a slightly different perspective, which I'd like to present. You know, anybody who, and we've had fatalities in India from COVID-19, and those are families, individuals, their children, parents, friends, and anybody, if we've all lost people we love, and when you lose people you love, no matter what the circumstances, it's very, very painful for that particular family, that particular individual, or those individuals involved with that person. But I think, you know, when I look at it, I say, how do we bring perspective to this that makes people, and again, fact-based perspective. And I broadly see that there are two groups of people who, or maybe three groups of people who are who could get infected. They're the young people who don't have any pre-existing conditions. And if you look at the data on that, which is now published, it may not be in India, but it's a fair representation of what may happen in India. The vast majority, and you'll read figures between 50 and 70% of people are asymptomatic, especially younger people asymptomatic. They show minor to no symptoms. And in India, those are the same people who drive our economy, who are the vast majority of our population. So that's one group of people. The second group of people are people who may be young, under 45, under 55, but who have diabetes, respiratory illnesses, and other illnesses that make them much more susceptible to COVID. And then there are the elderly who maybe also have many of these underlying diseases or conditions that make them the most vulnerable. And I think the first thing to do to stimulate demand is to actually share this information so that people understand, again, fact-based data on what's happening across the world. So people get a perspective, because right now people are scared. They're scared of going out. We did at Oberoi Hotels, we did a survey, and about over 40% of people said they would not travel till a vaccine comes out. That's, and you know, we have a global population of 7.8 billion people. You have to produce the vaccine and those numbers. You then have to administer those vaccines. It's not something that is going to happen in 12 months, perhaps not even in 24 months. So we have to live with COVID for this foreseeable future. And we can't stop living. I mean, people have to go on with their lives. So I think if we bring perspective to this information that gives people, the younger people, the understanding that actually there's very little risk associated with COVID. I mean, if you really put those risks, you wouldn't even drive a car, you wouldn't leave home. For the people who are vulnerable, we really need to think about the elderly and people with certain pre-existing conditions. What is it that we can do to help those particular people from getting infected? I know one of the things we've done in our organization, and I'm sure we're not unusual in this, I'm sure everybody's done it, is that we've said, you know, if you have any pre-existing conditions or you're of a certain age, irrespective, don't come to work, stay at home. Whether you can, you know, if you're at a corporate office, you can work from home. But even if you're not, don't risk getting unwell, because those people are at risk. But the other people need to, you know, realize that there is really very, very little less risk, and life can't come to a stop. You know, I'd just like to share some figures with you, Vir, which are unrelated. And if you give me 2 more minutes, if I'm over my time,
go ahead.
Tell me.
Go ahead.
But, you know, I was looking at figures. Now, you know, if I were to ask people in the audience, Do we know the number of children who under the age of 5 die every year or have died so far this year, right? These are children with parents. And I know if I lost a child, and I hope that day never ever comes, I don't know what I would do with my life. It's probably the biggest catastrophe that a parent can face. That figure stands at, for the first 5 months of this year globally, at 3 million people. It's slightly under 3 million people. There are going to be 6 million children who are going to die under the age of 5. If you look at things like, I unfortunately don't smoke, but if you look at deaths from smoking-related illnesses, that's sitting today at just under 2 million people. It's going to double to 4 million people. If you look at people who die from road accidents, so far the number is 530,000. It's going to double to just over 1 million people. So I think, you know, one size doesn't fit all, and we need to understand this. The children one particularly hurt me. Why aren't we doing more for our children? Why aren't we doing more for healthcare, and nutrition for people in our country? And we'll have a large number of people under the age of 5 or children who are dying in our country out of this number. Let's inform people. Let's present the facts so people can take the right decisions. Those decisions will stimulate demand, I have no doubt, and that will drive the economy, that will drive our business. And I think highlighting this is of critical importance. Governments and press and media really need to present these facts to the public so that there's awareness and people can take the right decisions for themselves.
Yeah. Thanks, Vikram. That's a very important point. I don't think people look at it from that perspective. I'm going to go to Neeraj Govil because Marriott has faced this kind of problem in China before. It's facing it now too. So I wanted to ask, do you think there are lessons for us from other countries' experience? Is there anything we can do based on what other countries have done? Neeraj?
I hope you're keeping well and staying well. I think there are lessons to be learned from how anyone else is dealing with this as well, not just China. But interestingly, we are starting as a company to see some signs, some very initial signs of some positivity coming out of China. As you know, China had SARS. It was the epicenter of SARS back in 2002. And a number of the other Southeast Asian countries were impacted by this too. And if you look back, what you realize is that as this happened in December and January of this year, the response from these countries to tackling the problem was at a much more advanced level than some of the other countries. So we've clearly seen that countries like South Korea, China, Japan responded very, very quickly to these and were able to contain the outbreak in fashion, I guess, than other countries. So we've obviously seen that they have managed to implement their learnings from SARS. Now, when you look at China or you look at South Korea today, where we are starting to see some signs of positivity, China, of course, is at a very different stage of the COVID cycle as compared to India, obviously, with India expected to peak sometime in late June or early July from what we're seeing. But in China today, I can tell you that the vast majority of hotels have reopened. At one point in time, Marriott had about 90 plus hotels that were closed. That number is down to single digits. China went through a phase where occupancies, very much like what they are here now, were in single digits for the most part. Hotels were really supporting government initiatives, housing medical workers and other staff dealing with the pandemic. And today, you know, it's good to see that in the month of May, it's possible that our Marriott hotels in China will report occupancies somewhere between 35 and 40% as an aggregated portfolio.
Yeah.
Right. So there is, what I'm trying to say here is, yes, we're on survival mode. Yes, we are really trying to keep our necks above the water here. But at the end of the day, there is light at the end of the tunnel. What has been extremely interesting to see, like some of the other panelists pointed out before, is that once there is a sense that the impact of COVID-19 is beginning to ebb, and China, like India, will in the very near term has turned to its domestic market, we are starting to see that social distancing is quickly being put to the back burner when people feel they're back in a safer environment. So to the point that Dr. Suri was making about restaurants and having people, in an aircraft and comparing that to the restaurants some time ago, we are starting to see that in China, over the holiday period that was there recently, the restaurants were pretty full. Hotels were running very high occupancies in some of the resort locations. So they have a mechanism in place to ensure that customers are in a safe environment. They have a mechanism in place to handle any sort of outbreak, which is giving confidence to the end user, which gives confidence to the associates to be able to take care of those customers. And then really we are starting to see some signs of positivity come out of there. The other thing I want to point out here, Vir, is we're starting to see the same in South Korea. Mm-hmm. And what is really interesting is I was talking to my counterpart who runs Australia and the Pacific, and there is talk there, very interestingly, of creating an Australia-New Zealand travel bubble, because both of these countries have been able to largely contain the virus. What they're saying is, let's allow travel between the two countries, but let's kind of bubble it up so no one from outside can get in. So what I guess what I'm trying to say here is, what is very interesting is you're seeing a bilateral agreement there between two countries where they're saying, let's travel from one to the other and open that space up. And chances are you're going to see that happen in other parts of the world and also in Asia, right? Everyone today is looking to attract the Chinese traveler to most destinations. Yeah. China is able to say that we've contained this. Chances are that there will be other countries focused heavily on tourism that sign up for these agreements with China and you might start to see an influx of Chinese tourists into these destinations. It could be Vietnam, it could be Thailand, it could be Sri Lanka. So I think looking forward, there are certainly some signs of positivity. We continue to have a great deal of belief in the long-term viability of the travel industry. Yeah. We all need to travel. And I think while we love technology, we are in a people industry. And I think when you look at it, when you look around, there are already some signs starting to emerge that there may be light at the end of this tunnel. Now, we have to get there to that stage. India is still, like I said, in different stage of the cycle. But I do see there are some green shoots on the horizon that we should be looking to and looking to learn from.
A couple of points from what you said. If, as Nakul says, this peaks in July, August, and after that things get better, there is a suggestion that we will get a vaccine perhaps a year or a year and a half later. Will we get people then becoming more optimistic about going out? Will we have that? Will we get what Vikram says, an increase in demand because we're not needlessly scaring people, we're putting younger people in the picture, giving them a truer perspective and thinking positively? Is that something that could happen?
I certainly believe it could, Vir, and there is no reason for it not. At the end of the day, we believe that looking forward, I think the first sense we get is that everyone's going to pivot towards our domestic traveler. We sit on this huge base of business, and I think all of us on this panel can agree that a large proportion of our business comes from the domestic traveler. Yeah. The initial travel that we see on the horizon is basically folks that can get into a car and drive to a particular location. So drive-to locations are going to be the first form that people are going to access, because there's some comfort in getting into your own vehicle and getting from point A to point B. So that's where staycations come in. And as borders start to open up, as these little bilateral agreements happen between our own states, you're probably going to see people get into a car and drive from Delhi to Jaipur or from Mumbai to Goa. So you're going to see stuff like that happen. Next, you're going to see essential business travel come through, right? And I think that's going to be the next phase. But it's critical here that the fear psychosis starts to ebb. I think, as Vikram correctly pointed out, it is important that we look at statistics and data and really ensure that we get out there and start getting going again. There is enough and more data to prove that the risk involved to a large section of society is not as significant as it is as people may want to think about. So there certainly is, it's about confidence. And I think as an industry, it is important for us to do a few things here. One, everyone's talked about the focus on health and sanitation. And I think the industry overwhelmingly is coming out and saying, we're going to do a lot in that space. Two, we've got to make sure that we remove any impediments to travel that the customer may have today. So we've got to be more flexible with our contracts, with our bookings. We've got to remove that impediment in the eyes of the customer. If the customer is willing to get on a plane today and fly to one of our hotels, I think it's important to take away all the contractual stuff that goes with it. Because in the very near term, we're very confident it's going to be a lot of last minute pickup in a very short booking window, and we've got to gear up to deal with it. And I think number three, we've absolutely got to make sure that everybody understands that as an industry, we are going to do everything possible to adhere with the new normal. Now that might mean right-sizing the business, repurposing the business. That might mean contactless experiences, a lot of AV. I was with a group of 100 folks today from the travel industry who talked to me and said, Neeraj, we'd like to get virtual site inspections done because we can't travel to your hotel, right? So we've got to gear up on that front for sure. But I think if we get these three things lined up, there is certainly a future that we should be looking forward to with optimism, in some sense and in some degree.
Let me take this to Sunjae Sharma of Hyatt. Sunjae, there's a lot of optimism in what Neeraj has said, and both Neeraj and Vikram have made the point that we should be aware of the real facts, who's at danger from COVID, who's not. But he's also made another point which is slightly worrying, which is that China seems to have opened up again for business. Australia is open, New Zealand is open. Countries like Vietnam are doing quite well in the battle. South Korea is doing very well. If all of these markets open, where does it leave India? Why would people want to come to India if all of these markets are open?
Thank you, Vir. And I wish the audience and the panelists very good health and well-being, and hope everybody is keeping safe. Now, when you listen to all the panelists, you listen to Nakul, you listen to Dr. Suri, you listen to KB. It's about what's going on, right? It's where we are, what our expectations were, and what the expectations of the industry were. Now, this soon is going to change, because once the lockdown opens, the expectations are going to be on us who are going to welcome customers, who want to open hotels. We need to answer three questions to ourselves. What are the expectations of our customers? What are the expectations of our associates? What are the expectations of our owners? Now, when we look at addressing these expectations, we will need to see how do we do it? Because all the components which we spoke about, we will address that. I think we need to start looking at from a lens of care, purpose of care initially. We need to see how we instill confidence, and then we need to see how we build trust. Now, when India comes in here, we need to be very mindful that the numbers in India, if you only look at the domestic market, if we can instill confidence, build trust, and actually care for those customers. And most of the data today, all the surveys also show that our fellow countrymen would not go overseas in a hurry, but they would go somewhere. Yeah. And as Neeraj alluded to, there are very healthy signs from staycation perspective, and we are experiencing the same at Hyatt. And with our position, our unique position in terms of size, scale, and footprint, I think we have had some great results in these markets, what Neeraj alluded to. But I think from us as operators, we need to see what we can provide, how we leverage data, how we monitor data, and how we listen to our customers, how we are grounded in listening, not only to our customers, but how do we also take care of our associates and the interests of our owners, whether it is from a efficiency perspective, whether it is from the cost perspective. So we need to be listening from all aspects, because now the expectations are from us and we cannot fail. That's the learning which we got when we heard Dr. Suri or Nakul or KB and the other panelists. We are now at a stage where we know what the expectations are, and now we need to really deliver, not only to the customers, but to the other parties as well. We need to see how we are flexible as operators, domestic and international chains, where we can provide flexible offers, where we can be flexible in our contracts, as Neeraj said, and how we can actually provide experiences in our hotels when a customer comes in the new normal. We need to see how we need to rethink our experience. Whether it is check-in, we need to actually rethink our experience from a telephone call of that booking to a checkout and until the airport or to the car. We need to redefine, we need to rethink all those experiences and see how we can make every engagement very experiential, with a smile, with the new norm. So that would be very, very important for us to do. We are in it together. We actually can combine all our forces and say, okay, let's say a destination in India is safe. Why can't we all promote that destination? Because all of us are present there. So we need to look at things which we have not thought before, and we need to think it together, because we all are in it together, and we need to, really get the better of it together. We need to win this war together from every aspect. That's what I would think.